vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Your penance is death!
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I want to start off with what I liked about this. This won't take long. So I did an interview with this guy called Shane Ryan. He's another independent filmmaker. And he mentioned something to me during our conversation. This was the longest interview I've ever done in my life. It lasted like 6 hours. I managed to edit it down to like 2, but we talked all night. But one of the many things that we talked about that I found interesting was we started talking about like art house films and artistic movies. And he told me like he never liked bad movies growing up as a kid. Like I love bad movies, like good bad movies, bad movies. I'm sure you do too, based on the movies that you review. So he told me when he first got into bad movies, he realized like there's a real parallel between like movies that we consider terrible and movies that we consider super artistic. And I think this movie is the epitome of that. There's so much things that can be viewed as artistic, yet this is a very, very bad movie. So, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Like, what do you think about the artistic integrity, and what do you think about the quality of this movie? I think that face says it all.
Yeah, I didn't think much of anything of this movie. You know, Gerald McRaney was in the TV show Major Dad in the late 80s, early 90s. All I could think about the entire 90 minutes of this movie was Major Dud. I was bored to tears with this movie. I didn't like it. I thought if there was artistry involved here, it was over my head, and maybe I'm too lowbrow to understand it, but I didn't get it.
Yeah, I know him from Simon and Simon. It's
right.
a show I watched in syndication where he was like detective with his brother or something. When I went on IMDb, I saw this was him. I thought this was one of those things where it's just like IMDb got it wrong because it's something done by people like Wikipedia. You can get things wrong because I'm like,
right.
Gerald McRaney, he has like a mustache, he's bald, but then when you really look at it, yeah, that's him. So that was the most interesting thing about this movie is realizing that Gerald McRaney was the lead actor. But as far as the art goes, like I thought it was interesting that they use like still images for the montage scene. You don't really see that too often. The lava lamp opening scene with the movements, the psychedelic feel to it with the sounds and the colors, like different scenes had different colors for emotions.
Yeah, like when he's having his headaches or whatever, and the little spinny thing comes on. Even when the band was playing, it looked strange too. But yeah, no, I get you.
Yeah, I mean, the sounds, the atmospheric sounds and noises, the spinning shotgun to symbolize like him accidentally killing his brother as a child. Again, these things, I'm not saying they're great, but if executed well, you could see them being done in an art house movie, you know, but this is clearly a bad movie. So those are things that at least found interesting to keep my attention during this very bad and boring movie. But suffice to say, I don't think either of us like this from an entertainment standpoint.
Not much, no. Sometimes these things can be spiced up with nude scenes in it, and there was a little bit of that, but not enough to keep me interested.
That's a weird thing with the nude scenes too. There was some nudity, but they showed you the most boring part. It's like post-sex. It's like if you're gonna have the nudity, at least show us some of the sex scenes. It's just like the awkward aftermath of like,
right.
You know, like, so are you sleeping over? I'm not sleeping over. Let me grab a cigarette. It's just, I don't know. It's all the awkward parts that they showed us. I thought this movie was a good time capsule though. Like this really felt like late 60s, early 70s.
Oh yeah.
With the fashion, I think someone was wearing like a plaid suit. There was the last girl, like her dress looked like a window curtain. Just like the cars, like it was a time capsule, so that was interesting. As like from a visual standpoint, like everything you're seeing on screen felt like of that era, and that was interesting to see. So
Yeah, it definitely had that feel. I was actually familiar with Gerald McRaney did another horror movie, I think a few years after this one, called The Brain Machine, which is just as awful. Um, so he did a few of these, obviously, back in the day. But I actually, aside from the movie itself, I knew nothing about this movie coming into it. But I pulled it up on IMDb this morning before I watched it, and I don't know if you can see that, but it has some absolutely wonderful cover art. I love the way that looks.
mhm.
But it has absolutely nothing to do with the movie. So I was excited. I thought it might be some sort of monster movie, but nope. I don't know what you call this movie. An attempt at art, maybe?
Yeah. One other thing that I thought was interesting was, aside from the fashion and the time capsule aspect of it visually, of that era, was the filmmaking aspect of that era. This was a bridge movie, I thought, between the 60s drive-in era and the 70s exploitation era. Because you have a lot of the 60s drive-in stuff with this, where this movie was clearly, it had a title, a poster, and a tagline before it had a script. Like that's, like you said,
Yeah.
that's a great poster. And this
Hmm.
conceptually, you could tell this was like a out of the Roger Corman handbook of like, let's come up with this stuff to sell the movie, and we'll just make whatever shitty movie afterwards once we have a good concept.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Ed Wood with Johnny Depp, but there was a similar thing where he wanted to make a very personal movie about his cross dressing, and his producers wanted to make some sort of raunchy exploitation film. But he got his money, he made his movie, but he made his movie, which was nobody could understand other than him. By the way, this actually was Joe McRaney's very first acting role. And I think he was like 22 or something.
Yeah, and you could see the starting of the balding.
Yep, you
Yeah,
certainly
so,
could. Yep.
yeah. But yeah, so I thought that aspect of it was interesting. You also had like the blood and gore H.G. Lewis stuff, like that you would see in the
Hmm.
60s. And also with the promotional stuff, aside from the poster, like you said, which was great, they also advertised it as Violent Vision, and they would pay you $1,000 if a family member dropped dead while viewing it.
Yeah.
That was part of that whole 60s era of drive-in stuff, where you would have like, I think it was House on Haunted Hill, where it had the skull moving through the theater, and certain theater seats would be shocked, and 3D first came out. It was a lot of that gimmicky stuff in that era, and I think this movie had
Right.
a lot of that. But I also thought it bridged with a lot of the 70s stuff, with the exploitation era as well, where you had some sex and some nudity. You would have some of that in the 60s, but it was more so promised and not shown. This, at least there was some stuff shown.
Yeah, it seemed like they were just getting started with that era. Like you said, early 70s, 72, 73, you had a lot more exploitative stuff. This was 69. They were just kind of hinting at it a little bit, pushing the envelope a little bit for that year maybe. But yeah, there was more to come soon after that. If you want to talk about something I particularly did like about this movie, I did like a couple of the death scenes, with a couple people got an axe. They died by the axe. I thought those scenes were actually halfway decent. you know
Well, that's something you like that I didn't even pay attention to. I was just trying to like find something interesting about the movie that maybe I didn't really pay too much attention to, if the death scenes were very good or not. Uh, Another thing I liked about the filmmaking aspect was, speaking of the exploitation era as well, is it felt very guerrilla style filmmaking. And I think with the 60s independent filmmakers, the films felt a little bit static, a lot of shooting in rooms, a lot of like, set camera shots, just like wide shots, capture all the action, minimal
sure.
takes. I think when you got into the 70s, it was a lot more guerrilla style. It was, you could tell it was like a lot more handheld, shooting on street corners without permits. This had a feel to that with it. And there were certain points where I was like, man, this, you could put this scene in like one of my favorite exploitation films. It'd be more boring, but visually it felt the same. Like, you know, I can't tell you how many exploitation films I saw where it was supposed to be a police station, but it was clearly the corner of some office with a table, you know, and two cops yelling with like a lamp, you know, as the interrogation light, you know, or just like where the cops are sitting in the back of the car that's supposed to be a police car with the guy. It just felt like really like early exploitation stuff that could have been like, you could have just dropped those scenes in like a blaxploitation film.
Yeah, and I think obviously a lot of that also comes by the budget. They simply don't have any money to do anything more realistic.
Yeah, yeah. What did you think of the psycho plot twist in there?
In terms of
Well,
with the mother,
the mother.
yeah. I mean, I kind of thought all along that he wasn't doing it, and it seemed kind of obvious halfway through the film, if not earlier, that he obviously had mother issues. Mother was alive in this movie as opposed to in Psycho, so I wasn't shocked, put it that way.
Mhm.
I saw it coming.
You know, if I were to rewatch this film, which I will never do, maybe I would agree with you. But I don't know if it was out of boredom or apathy, but I just thought it was him the whole time and there was no mystery to it.
Really?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, like he sees those spiral things we're seeing on the screen. He goes crazy and he kills people. I'm like, why is there not like throwing him in jail? Like, why are they like letting him out on bail? I didn't put any thought into it because the film I watched didn't look like it had any thought put into it as well. So I just didn't bother myself. So
Yeah, I mean, initially there was that scene where one of the women got killed with an axe, I think, in her neck or her throat, and he appeared right after that. So they gave the hint that yeah, he may have done this because he was crazy or something. But I got the impression that it wasn't him. I just got that impression earlier on that it wasn't him, and if it wasn't him, who else could it be? And since he had these mother issues and she was overbearing, that's where I went to.
it's funny that you say that. That's the scene that would convince me it was him because it felt like she turned around and recognized him. Then she was calling his name, then she got stabbed, and it seemed like seconds later he was standing over her. So that's the scene that actually convinced me it was him.
Yeah, I felt just the opposite there. I felt there was just enough of a gap that the movie is leading you to believe that, of course, it's him. But wait a minute, I wasn't fooled by that one. That actually made me believe opposite of you.
Okay. Well, somehow this movie was smarter than me. I don't know how. Maybe I'm the
like you
one guy
said, though,
they duped.
it also could be of boredom because I found my mind wandering sometimes too, and if sometimes you miss some things like that, but who knows?
Yeah, I think it was more apathy than boredom. Like if I was watching this film without reviewing it, I'd be bored. But when I'm watching a film, no matter how I think about it, if I'm watching it for a review, I'm paying attention. So I
Right.
would just think is more apathy or indifference to like what
That
I
could
was
very
watching
well
on
be.
screen. So
Yeah.
but yeah, two overwhelming thumbs down for this one.